Thank you. Collaborating with Rolls-Royce on some overhauls of their some of their CFD codes. And this got brought into our tools group where Bert Wazog and I have been helping try to bring some of this to a more generalized state. So, bit of motivation up front. The fairness principles, I'm sure most of you have seen before from this series of discussions leading to a 2016 paper: findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. And quickly, in the context of performance data and performance metadata, I would summarize these as follows. We want to know which performance experiments that we've already done are relevant to the problem that I'm looking at right now. We want the metadata and the data to be kept together in some way that they will actually stay accessible. Because thank you, Emma, for motivating so much of what I wanted to say in these slides. These codes live a very long time. And you may want to be looking back at something that is ancient history. You want these to be interoperable. You want to use common formats and common semantics within your tools and ideally across tools to describe performance data and performance metadata. And these need to be reusable, which means you need to record enough metadata along with your performance experiment to know whether it is still valid. And that, I think, is going to drive much of what we are talking about the rest of this talk in terms of data collection. So, performance metadata has over the years also kind of exploded. So if you look at just these big categories on the left, and you were running a performance experiment in the dim dark ages of 1999 when I was an undergrad, that might be a sufficient set of metadata to characterize a performance experiment. I used this application, I used this tool, I ran it at this scale on this machine, and I have my results. It's 2024, that doesn't cut it. You want to know exactly how is the application built. You may not have one tool, you may have 6 that are running in conjunction, some of which you control, some of which your site administrators control. How's that configured? How were all of those tools built? What information could you possibly get out of this? What data is it giving you in what format? What system did you run on? What modules were loaded? What were your inputs? Could you characterize them for me? What file system were you running on? Over what dates? Not that file systems would ever be unreliable for any of us. What did I measure? What didn't I measure? What results did that give us, and where are they stored? So how does this all tie into CFD? I hope I don't have to sell you guys on this. If you are doing any sort of performance measurement, particularly as part of your continuous integration, there's always the hazard that you're generating write once, read never, or at best, write once, read once performance data. And our goal here is to collect enough metadata that that's not actually going to be the case anymore. That you can tell whether some CI/CD performance run is applicable to this production problem or not. And a basis we're using for this is the resource description format, RDF. And this allows us to use other people's defined ontologies for metadata, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is going to help with interoperability. So we might want to answer a whole bunch of hypothetical questions. Find me traces that match this input. What's the peak core count that we have run against? What's the most common core count we have run against? Find me all of the performance data that was run on this particular Git commit. Do we get the same performance behavior on two different clusters that should behave similar? How do compiler flags affect things? What binaries were touched by this Git commit? What's the average parallel efficiency in this particular set of runs? All of these are good questions that you might like to be able to answer, and you'd like to be able to pose a simple database query that will give you those answers. So how are we going to do this? Well, first we want to put some structure on the metadata. Lau et al. A couple years ago published this HPC ontology in their paper that defines a bunch of common things for describing HPC systems, HPC software, and general things about jobs. They were focused a bit on machine learning, as you can see, but that's not automatically a barrier. We can keep the parts that are generic, and we can extend those with things like how is score P built, as you see in some of the RDF on the right-hand side here. So this is basically the sort of structured or semi-structured text format that we're going to be producing metadata in. There's a bunch of this that we can already collect in score P as part of the instrumentation process. And what I'm showing you here, we already have a merge request open that does this. It's not in any release yet, but you are welcome to work with it if you're interested. So at compile and link time, we can build in information about what you are building. So what's the language, what are the source files? That's already been there to some extent, but also compiler flags, when, what were the loaded modules? So we start extending these things. We can also, as part of our runtime initialization, start recording default information about how the application was run. So we can grab some default environment variables. Things like OpenMP num threads. We can grab the full set of Slurm or PBS environment variables. We can grab things that you as the user tell us about. And we take all of that and we pack it into this JSON LD description. So we have a description. How do we get it into the binary? Well, every binary file we generate when we're instrumenting, we want to describe by valid metadata. As I said, we can know some of this at compile and link time. And short answer in the interests of time, stuff it in an ELF section. They can be concatenated as long as you're doing static linking. Life is good. We want to switch data formats so that we can actually properly concatenate without any post-processing. But really, that's it. It's as simple as, adding sections to a binary. If that doesn't sound simple to you, I apologize, but there are tools for this. Right. So So much for what we can do at compile and link time. Collecting everything starts getting challenging, as we can see with this diagram on the right. So we have the blue section that is basically input and simulation metadata. We have this yellow section that is how the application was built, this gray section on the right, how it was run. All of these can influence the runtime behavior, which we will then record in our performance data. And we need to somehow record all of the runtime state, including things from the user, in runtime metadata. We need to take these profiles and traces, potentially convert them to derived metrics. That also goes into runtime metadata, all of that collected post-run. But we're accumulating things from a vast number of sources, and ultimately, this relies on a bit of help from the user. We can get the executable state, we can get the system state, but you need to actually tell us, what is meaningful about the simulation you just ran. Otherwise, you're going to have some trouble. We can help again with the predefined environment variables you saw in the last slide. So for external sources, you have your inputs and configuration. That's obviously going to influence performance. We have to integrate that, but what is that? There is no general prescription. So we provide these basic integration points. Tell us what environment variables to record, and then we will let you link that via RDF to the SCORE-P experiment results. Fairly simple, I hope. So we can see how this works. You might provide a get commit hash. You might provide a hash of your input data. It doesn't need to be hashes, it can be whatever you want, but caches are really easy to do automatically. More generalized things you may have to think about and do with manual integration. You say, I want to save these environment variables, and they will come out in the metadata as you see on the right here. So, when it comes time to look at the actual performance data, we're actually not thinking about performance at runtime, if that makes sense. The SCORE-P measurement system doesn't know until it's time to write things out to disk anything like a complete picture of how your application is behaving. So we have to first assemble the profile and trace, and then we can put in some summary metrics. So, here's this post-processing step where these external sources go into the RDF. And again, we have put some of this into SCORE-P. So we can say, we're going to grab the experiment path. We're going to collect, for instance, the pop metrics, maybe wrap that into some additional external metrics based on automated analysis of the output, and define that all in a JSON file. So where do we go from here? Well, now we want to take all of this that we have as a collection of JSON in the SCORE-P experiment directory. And this is already good. This is local information that tells us how things were run. It's basically complete metadata about that single experiment. we want to take that and we want to put it in a database such that we can do good comparisons. So we have this lightweight tooling, ScorePDB, that makes it easy for you in principle to take this metadata from the experiments and aggregate it so that you can then do queries on it. So what does this look like? We have this notion of offline and online experiments where we're either doing this in a local database or a remote database. But in either case, you have these add, query, and merge operations where you can add some chunks of JSON to an existing experiment. You can run some Sparkle query against that database, or you can merge some set of configurations. We use Sparkle because it happens to be convenient for this sort of unstructured query. This is an example of how you would get a summary of experiments that were run throughout the database with links to performance data, name of the application, when it ran, where it ran, and whatever external JSON got written out. And putting it all together, it winds up looking like this. You add a few exports to your run script, telling us what variables to record. We already use ScoreP info to get the metadata, collect things, put it in the database, run the query, get our results. So we've extended ScoreP with a metadata collection mechanism, and we have some basic framework for how to integrate this and introduce external sources, some lightweight tooling. And we want to go further. We want to make this all work with dynamic linking, new features, and new metadata sources, and so on, and make this really production ready. And with that, I do not want to keep us from dinner, but I will be happy to take whatever questions you guys will allow me to, either now or on the walk over.